and welcome to a special episode of the Energy Central Power Perspectives podcast. Usual listeners know that we typically feature our host, Jason Price, interviewing important guests from across the power industry. But for the second year in a row, we're excited to interrupt that regular schedule and bring you a conversation directly led by the guests themselves, Bill Meehan and Pat Hohl. Regular listeners of our podcast don't need an introduction to Bill and Pat, as they're some of the most frequent guests of the Energy Central Power Perspectives podcast. But in case this is your first time listening into them, you are in for a treat, as these two directors at Esri are going to be chatting about the upcoming IMGIS Conference, exploring how innovation and digital transformation in infrastructure management are unlocking the potential of GIS across industries. With insights on everything from emergency management to AI-driven imagery, this episode offers valuable takeaways for anyone in utilities, transportation, or telecommunications. Enjoy!
Welcome, everybody, to our podcast today. My name is Bill Meehan. Joining me today is my colleague, Pat Hohl. And today we're going to be talking about our conference coming up in the fall called IMGIS. One of the themes that are going to be present throughout this conference is this concept of innovation. So, Pat, talk a little bit about innovation in relationship to our conference at IMGIS. Pat?
Well, we attend a lot of events, and there is a lot of talk these days about innovation. I think innovation and technology is really important. Maybe we should start by identifying what IMGIS stands for. It's a little bit of a pun, IMGIS, but it really means infrastructure management around GIS. And I like to ask the question, where does innovation even come from? And it can come from a lot of different places, including new technology. But I think one of the most intriguing places that innovation comes from is when you see an idea in another place and you think to yourself, I could use that in what I do. And you apply that to your own work. And IMGIS, in as much as it pulls in electric, gas, and water utilities, telecommunications providers, transportation, and AEC, there's a lot of different cross-pollination of ideas there. And if you are an electric utility and you're struggling with telecommunications things, wouldn't you like to hear how the telecommunications people are solving those problems? Doesn't that make sense to you?
It surely does. Yeah. One of the things that I think about with innovation, again, is looking at other industries or what other people have done. And I don't know about you, but I spent a lot of time buying and selling cars. I don't know. I know you have to, because it's a thing. And I went to a place. I'm not going to say who that is because I'm not going to pitch them. But I sold a couple of cars, and they did something really fantastic. They have you go in a room and they have a dashboard that tells you exactly where are you in the step along that process. And they tell you everything. They communicate it so brilliantly that I'm thinking to myself, why can't utilities internally do that sort of thing? Or why can't, when you sit in an emergency room, why can't they tell you where you are in the sequence? And, we're going to see a lot of things around field productivity, doing things and not like the same old way. And I think innovation there, and not just in huge innovations or huge inventions, but in some of the tasks that you do every single day, that can really, really pay a lot of dividends. What do you think about that? I mean, I think that's something we should really look at. And I do think you're going to get that here. Not that you won't get it in the electrical sections, you will. But you might want to look at, I love railroads. I mean, I'd like to sit in a couple of the railroad sessions and see how they do stuff, because they got to track trains and they have to do this kind of tracking and everything. It's pretty fascinating what they've done with new technology and using GIS.
It's exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about. And I think you're probably baiting me with a car question here, because,
Yes,
I could talk about cars for a while.
We could talk about cars for a long time. Yeah.
We could. Well, if you were to query a set of utility executives and say, what are the big challenges that you're working on? I'll bet you they would name some things like productivity. How do we utilize artificial intelligence? How do I deal with equity and sustainability? Better project delivery, better customer engagement, and finally transforming many of these paper processes to digital or electronic processes. There's a theme on every one of those things this year at IMGIS, focused around what other utilities are doing, where they're winning, and how they're doing it, and the true stories of what they've done. And you and I both ran utilities. We both had to sign a lot of travel requests and decide who went to which kind of conferences. If I was picking a conference to send an engineering manager or an operations manager to get some real useful ideas about how to advance our business, this is where I would send them. How about you?
That's right. And when I think about, kind of the things that really make a difference in running a utility, it's really the three. I like to think of the three C's. I'm sorry. I love the idea. Collaboration, communication, and coordination. And if you could figure that out, that would really be good. The other thing those three C's apply to many, many industries. Well, how about this? Even to sports teams, right? When you think about, a football team, they think about, well, what is the other team going to do, and how am I going to exploit their weakness? How am I going to leverage my own, or kind of minimize my weakness, and kind of put the two pieces together? When you think about the major thing that has happened in our industry is storms and emergency preparedness and emergency response. And if you think of, well, what would a football team? Well, the the enemy or the other team is the weather, and where are the places in our system that are really weak, and what would I do with it? And then how do I leverage that? How do I shore that up? How do I practice it so that I don't end up in that? So there's another whole section on kind of emergency management that applies not just to electric, but to gas and to rail and to water, all of these things. And so I think when we think about what they do compared to what you do, that's going to be interesting. So go to the sessions. You might even poke your nose into some of even the SIGs that have to do with nothing with your industry, and you can hear people tell their stories. And that's really the key, is storytelling. I think you're going to hear a lot of storytelling at IMGIS and the use of our technology.
You mentioned the SIG. We might have some listeners that don't know
what
a
SIG
is.
For?
Special Interest Group. And so that is a loosely structured, informal time where birds of a feather, if you will, can get together and talk about the things that they want to talk about, identify where their successes are, but where their challenges are as well. Find other people that they can connect with and share ideas and continue that conversation as things go further. You are absolutely correct. When I go to events, I kind of make a sport of seeing what people are most interested in. And people are always, always interested in emergency management.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that's kind of evolving over the years, and Pat, when I was doing GIS, 20, 30 years ago, we'd never thought about imagery. I mean, imagery was just sort of, like taking a picture or maybe a satellite photograph. But imagery has become really, really integral to the operations and the planning of utilities and all these other industries. And it'll be interesting to see what other industries are doing with imagery, to see how they use image and leverage imagery. And with artificial intelligence, cool, right? Because artificial intelligence not only takes the picture, looks at a picture, but it actually can analyze things. Well, one of my favorite demos that one of my colleagues put together was this idea of looking at imagery to figure out where water is going to flow underneath and undermine a structure like a transmission tower. And who would have thought you could do that? Well, really? Or maybe using it in vegetation management, looking at imagery and seeing, hey, this tree, I can tell what kind of tree that is by looking at the imagery and analyzing it. It's fascinating stuff. Or LiDAR, all of that stuff. So we're going to see a lot of stuff on imagery at IMGIS. It's really a fascinating stuff. And that's really where innovation can really, really happen.
I think you're right. Imagery is absolutely fascinating. Years ago, when we first got our digital orthophotography for the service territory, a coworker of mine joked that he wasn't going to be happy until he could stick his hand out the window, wave to the sky, and see it on his screen. A real-time satellite view, if you will. And of course, we're not there yet for utilities. Maybe the military is, but we're not there yet. But did you know that some of our business partners will allow you to task a satellite on a website today, take a fresh set of images of that in the next 24 hours, and you'll have fresh imagery of that area tomorrow. Imagine that usefulness in terms of emergency response and seeing what your damage looks like.
Yeah, I mean, damage assessment is huge. And if we think about restoration for a power company, if we have to run around with pens and paper and yellow notebooks to go out into the field and capture all this imagery. It takes a long time, and then you have to bring it back and analyze it. But the combination of things like field inspection, imagery, drones, and dashboards and mobility, all of these things put together creates a real powerful tools to be able to restore power. And that's what people really want. They don't want to wait around for, well, we're going to get to it, but we got to do all this analysis first, a couple of hours before we can even figure out what our damage is, and then get the crews that we need to fix, or send them to where they need to be fixed. So that's really, really something fascinating. I'd like to kind of talk also about this concept of digital transformation. Pat, give me a little example of, this digital what does that mean, and why is IMGIS a place that you can go to get some concepts of digital transformation nailed down?
It reminds me of a couple of years ago at the Esri user conference, at the special interest group meeting. Somebody sheepishly asked a question about their paper process, and I could see that they were somewhat embarrassed to even ask the question. And I stopped the group and I just said, show of hands, who is still dealing with paper processes that they're not proud of and they wish that they could digitize? Every hand in the room went up, every single hand. And so I think it's important to realize, as an industry, we're starting from a fairly low level of historical technology and capability. We've been doing things the same way for a long time. We've made a lot of advancements, but we have a long way to go. And so I think it's really key to be able to hear from other users about where they have seen success, where they have enjoyed leveraging their GIS platform. Most utilities are using Esri software in mapping their infrastructure. How can you make the most of that? Especially if you have an enterprise license agreement and you have access to all this capability that maybe you're not using to its fullest extent. It's incredible to hear what other people are doing in your industry and other industries. And you only have to come home with one good idea from a conference to make it all worthwhile. I always thought that. I went to conferences and I thought, if I come home with one, maybe two good ideas that I can apply, it's going to be all worthwhile.
Right. And maybe what you do is, before you get there, you think to yourself that I need some ideas, but think about some of the big problems you have, not just in terms of the GIS, but just generally. Like, what are some of the big problems you have? Like, I always think of like customer service. The customers, they're not all that happy necessarily. We do surveys about my customer satisfaction, all that kind of stuff. But what if you could like think about GIS in a new way of, Pat, you mentioned equity and different kinds of, because people are different all over the place. But it's too bad we don't have a tool that could actually map out what people think, and what kind of coffee they buy. Oh, guess what? We do have that sort of stuff, and why not apply that to outage restoration, or apply it to investments, apply equity and what people think, what their motivation. You have, latte people, and you have, black coffee people like me, all those kinds of things. I think that's really going to be fascinating. And that's really, I think, the notion of digital transformation. One of the companies that I really admire using technology in terms of digital transformation is Uber. I mean, we take Uber all the time, or Lyft, or any of these kind of services. And it really, what it does is it flips the equation around. That's what, instead of, hauling, flagging down a cab or calling a cab company and say, can you come there? I don't know, who knows? They come to you and they know where you are. And you don't have to pay them. It just happens. I mean, you pay them, but you don't have to pay them right there. You don't have to have the cash. That's really transformational. Oh, it flips the whole equation around. And I think sometimes, because we're so ingrained in our processes, it's really good to take a fresh look and find out what other industries or what other customers have done to flip the equation around. And that's really, I think, the whole notion of mobility flips that equation around.
I think that captures it very nicely. So let's talk about a couple specifics. IMGIS is an Esri conference, ESRI, and you can find it on the web. The link will be in the description as well. It is in October, the 22nd to the 24th in Palm Springs, California. Palm Springs is nice in October. There will be a golf tournament the day before, if that interests you. And it's a very lovely facility with somewhere around 1,200 really great utility people as well. So Bill and I would like to personally invite you to consider coming to IMGIS this year, either in person or digitally, if you want to participate virtually. Any final words for the audience, Bill?
No, I think you stated it well. I always look forward to this conference because it's so focused and it uses the technology. We'll have, and by the way, we'll also have technical sessions as well, right? All kinds of there'll be technical people who, by the way, didn't have to travel very far from Redlands. A lot of people from Redlands. We have a big staff of technically fantastic people. They'll be there to answer your questions, and you'll be able to see the people who actually did this, creates the software. They'll be there. That's really going to be fun.
Absolutely. Great point. And a lot of our business partners as well that help with implementations and extending the technology. There'll be heavy partner participation there. So I would want to personally invite you to consider attending IMGIS this year.
We'll see you in October.
Thank you. We'll see you in October.
California.